Our good friend Charles McElwee back in our studios for another history segment. He's the Vice President of the Board of Directors for the Greater Hazleton Historical Society and Museum. You always find interesting tidbits for us, and Hazleton now included in a recent book, recent meaning just, released a few months ago, talking about heritage here in this area.
Yes, so The End of Outrage came out earlier this fall, published by Oxford University Press. It was written by Brendan McSivna, who is a historian currently he's doing the fellowship in Galway, Ireland. And he actually visited Hazleton a few years ago and gave a presentation at Penn State Hazleton about the links between the Hazleton area and County Donegal, Ireland. So the book focuses on his hometown in Ireland, and he's from County Donegal, and about how that region adjusted after the famine in the 1840s. And as we all know, the famine wiped out the population of Ireland, was devastating, arguably genocide to many historians. But that part of Ireland wasn't as impacted as other parts of Ireland. And Brendan takes a look at that, and he talks about how that part of Ireland, Donegal, adjusted after the famine. He focuses on some elements of the story that apply to here. He talks about the Ribbonmen and the precursor to the Molly Maguires, and he talks about Patrick McGlynn, who was an informer of the Mollies in Ireland. And as we know just from the movie The Molly Maguires, that was kind of the story that happened in this region as well. But I highly suggest that anybody with Irish roots in the Hazleton area, that they read this book, because the index itself reads like the roster of St. Gabriel's Parish in the, I guess, the 20th century, or really, more likely than not, if your family immigrated here from Donegal, your last name will be found in this book, because it talks about different families. And I even found out the McDevitt's, who I'm descended from, they were innkeepers in Ireland. He talks about them. So every family, I highly suspect, would find something out about themselves if they read this book. And it's a fascinating read, and I highly recommend it.
Are you continuing to be amazed by the fact that Hazleton is always prominent in a lot of these, books like this, of this nature, and that, like, our history is kind of well known?
6 degrees of Hazleton every time. It really is. It's incredible. And you'll find out bizarre things about your culture if you're Irish. I mean, in Donegal in the early 1800s, they were Catholic, but they were not practicing Catholicism the way we imagine it today. They were not as devoted. They were not going to church every Sunday. They were not devoted. There wasn't a sacramental devotion, because really they were incorporating elements of their native Irish culture, that mystical culture, into Catholicism. And it really wasn't until the relaxation of the penal laws from England that the church came in, and the native Irish population became more devout. And that obviously carried over into the United States, where we saw really it had an impact on urban development in so many cities like Philadelphia or even Hazleton, that you always had the parish in the center of every neighborhood, because it was a mortal sin to miss Mass. So you always had to be within walking distance because of the transportation of the 19th century. But just little things like that, little elements of your past lineage, that I think will make this read very entertaining.
All righty. And as you're here all the time, we always want to give a plug for the Historical Society. So if people want to go make a donation or find out more about the history of our area, where do they go to?
Please visit hazletonhistory.org.
All righty. Charles McElwee, he'll be back with us again with more interesting tidbits of our history.